Okay, wait, I want to answer the rest of your question. So can't U.S. raise interest rates? So I'm getting this question quite often. I should make a video about this. So just out of my head, okay? So the U.S., the Federal Reserve, or the government, it's the same thing. They cannot raise rates effectively to fight inflation, because the federal funds rate, which is at 0.25%, like basically zero at the moment, is also the rate how they issue debt. So when you print money, there's not actually like a money printer, obviously, where you press a button and then money comes out. They have that too, but that's not how you. So mainly we do it with securities issued by the government, like treasury bills. That's how you create, and that is paid for with created money. But mainly we do it right now with quantitative easing. So quantitative easing, so I get this a lot too. A lot of people here, they say, oh, quantitative easing is not printing. They do quantitative easing. So quantitative easing is when the Fed buys publicly issued bonds. So corporate bonds, mortgage-backed securities, and they buy them with printed money. So every time a dollar bill is created, at the same time, there is debt created, which will be paid back. So how to explain this? Okay, for example, you all know crypto, right? So you probably heard the argument, oh, crypto has no value, but fiat currency has no value either, blah, blah, blah. They're wrong. Fiat currency has some value, at least. The US dollar has some value, because every time you have a US dollar, you create debt with that. And the promise to pay off that debt by the strongest government or the strongest military in the world, which is the US. So every time they print money, they create more debt. So the plan is to print so much with such low rates so that it creates inflation, so they can pay back that debt with devalued money. That's the whole point. So the entire country, like, you have to imagine, we're living in a democracy, and the people are corrupt. The people want more free stuff. Okay? So to pay for that free stuff, how can you pay for it? You can, use tax money you have to pay for it. You can take debt from other countries to pay for it, or you can print. So increasing taxes will not pay for it anymore. Taking more debt from outside will not pay for it anymore. So the only thing left to do for this bankrupt government is to print. But you have to do so without causing hyperinflation, and you have to do so with low interest rates, obviously. So because every time you create debt, you have to pay off that debt with that created money. So an easier example, sorry, I'm going like on this train, but I really want you guys to understand this. So if let's say I lent you $100, okay? And by the end of the year, you have to pay me back 1% interest. Okay? So I'm lending you $100. The year passes and you give me back $101. Okay, cool. I made $1, right? And you had your $100 to do whatever. Great. But now imagine that year the inflation rate is 2%. 2. So I give you $100 with 1% interest, so you pay me back 101. I make money, right? No, I don't. Because if the inflation rate is 2%, the $100 bill that I gave you by the end of the year devalued by 2%. So if you pay me back 1%, I didn't make any money. I lost money for lending you money. And that's the whole trick. And that's the whole thing. So they print a bunch of money with super low rates. And then they cause inflation. And then that debt that the government creates with the Fed, and the Fed also monetizes, is paid back with devalued money. And what it does is it makes you poorer. It makes you and me poorer. So it's basically taxing us. So you are basically being taxed with inflation to pay for the government debt that you and me, that we created for demanding more stuff for free, quote unquote. And what do people do? Do people wake up and say, hey, we have to cut spending? No. People double down. They want more free stuff, free healthcare, student loan debt forgiven, free schooling, free this, free this. There is no free. Nothing is for free. The more free shit you want, the more money has to be printed to give you that free stuff, and the less that free stuff or that money that is printed is worth, the poorer you are. So are people taking responsibility and being smart about this and saying, being understanding and voting the right people into office that would fix the problem? No. There were presidents in the past, there were people in the past that tried to do the right thing. They don't stay in office. They get voted out. So to answer your question, can the US raise rates? The debt right now is close to $30 trillion, US debt. And I think the Fed or the payback, like there's a pie chart that you can Google, and about, I think 1.1% or so, or 1% is being, $1 trillion is paid every year towards the debt at those low rates. So let's say you want to counter inflation, right? So inflation as measured, let's use the CPI that they give you, which is totally wrong, by the way. Inflation is not 7% for this year. It's more like 18%. But let's use their measurements that they give us to measure inflation. 7%. So just like with my example with the $100 bill, so I can make money, I have to lend that money to you with a rate that is higher than the inflation rate, right? So to counter inflation, what the Fed has to do is they have to raise rates above the inflation rate. So if it's 7%, then they have to, tapering or not, QE or not, they have to raise rates above 7%. So let's think for a moment, it just raises rates by 2%, which would not fight inflation, because the inflation rate will still be above that rate. Okay, so right now, the debt's $30 trillion, right? Close to 30 trillion, like 29 trillion, whatever. And about 1 trillion is paid for every year. So let's increase it by 2%. What is like 1% of 30 trillion? Well, like 3 trillion, right? So 2% would be like 6 trillion. Let's say 5 trillion. Let's just say $5 trillion. Okay. I'm such a dumbass. 0.3. So it would be an additional $1 trillion, like 0.9 trillion, right? Would be 2% on top of whatever. So on top of the current rate of $1.1 trillion, so the Fed has to basically double. So the payment year by year would be $2 trillion in our example, just increasing the rate by 2%, right? Because you pay off 1.1% right now, plus the 0.9% additional because of the 2% of 30 trillion. So it will be at $2 trillion every year. So the Build Back Better plan is 1.75 trillion, which is massive. It would be more than that every year. So the debt payment for the US government on that pie chart will suddenly double, just with 2%, would double. So how can you pay that and welfare spending, which we talked about before? Well, you can't. Now imagine that to actually counter inflation, you have to increase it by over 7%. That would be like $5 trillion, $6 trillion a year. And just to put this into perspective, 1 billion seconds, I believe, is 32 days. No, wait, 1 billion seconds is... What was that? I think sorry, 1 billion seconds is 14 days or so, or 13 days. 1 trillion seconds is 32.5 years. If you don't know what a trillion is. Sorry, that was a long answer, but